I didn't notice her the first time. Not really. She was just the woman who lived across the hall, mid-40s, maybe, always with a canvas-tote bag slung over her shoulder and that tired but kept-together look of someone who knew how to carry herself. But over weeks, routines have a way of becoming stories. For me, it was the way she lingered in the laundromat downstairs. She didn't bury herself in her phone like everyone else. She sat with a paperback open on her lap, eyes skimming slowly, as if the book was an excuse to stay in the quiet hum of dryers longer than necessary. I was 23. Half my meals were reheated noodles. I left texts in draft boxes instead of sending them. And sometimes I'd pass her in the narrow hallway, the scent of detergent trailing behind her, and feel like maybe adulthood had a rhythm I hadn't found yet. One Tuesday evening it happened. She looked up from her book as I struggled with a laundry basket that was too full. The sock on top slipped, hit the floor, and I muttered something under my breath. "You're ambitious," she said, nodding at the basket like it was a life choice. I laughed awkwardly. "Or just bad at folding." Her smile was quick, gone almost as soon as it arrived. But I noticed the way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and glanced back at her page like she'd allowed more than she meant to. The next week, I caught her again. This time, she closed the book when I sat across from her, waiting for my cycle to finish. "Don't you have better places to be than this?" she asked. I shrugged. "Laundry piles up." "You." "Same," she said, though the way she lingered told me it wasn't the whole truth. It became a rhythm, small exchanges, brief, nothing dramatic. A nod in the hallway, a borrowed dryer sheet, her noticing I always bought the same canned coffee from the vending machine. Once, I found an extra one waiting on the ledge. She didn't admit it was hers, but her eyes gave it away when I said thanks. The thing is, attraction doesn't always crash in. Sometimes it seeps, slow, through the cracks of repetition. I found myself rehearsing casual lines before knocking on her door to borrow dish soap. I found myself glancing too long at the veins on her hands when she folded her book closed. One night, after midnight, I was leaning against my doorway, scrolling through nothing, when her door opened. She stepped out barefoot, holding her phone like she'd been debating something. For a second, we just stared at each other across the hall's dim light. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked. I shook my head. "You?" She hesitated, then gave a small laugh. "That obvious?" I wanted to say something easy. Instead, I just nodded, heart beating faster than the silence between us. She lingered like she might add more, then pulled her cardigan tighter around her and turned back toward her door. But just before closing it, she said, almost to herself, "You're just a boy." The latch clicked softly, leaving me alone with the echo. And then, 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a message I wasn't expecting, from her. The message was simple. "T?" No explanation, no emoji. Just a word and a question mark. I stood there in the doorway too long, staring at my phone like it might vanish if I blinked. My first thought was to ignore it, pretend I hadn't seen it, because I didn't know what kind of line she was drawing. But my feet were already moving. Her door opened before I knocked. She must have been waiting. The apartment smelled faintly of chamomile and old wood. Books stacked on the coffee table, a lamp with a soft shade, slippers neatly set by the door. It wasn't the space of someone trying to impress. It was lived in, like she had nothing to prove. She handed me a mug without asking how I liked it. "Careful, hot." We sat across from each other at her small dining table. The silence stretched, not uncomfortable exactly, but filled with things neither of us knew how to name. Finally, she said, "I've lived here 12 years. Strange to think I've seen so many neighbors come and go, but I never invite them in." I nodded, unsure what she expected me to say. "Why me, then?" Her smile was quick, almost shy. "You don't try too hard." For a moment, I felt like she'd opened a window and let me see something private. We talked about nothing: laundry machines breaking down, the neighborhood changing, her favorite cafe that closed 2 years ago. Then, unprompted, she said, "I used to come here with my husband." Before the divorce. The word hung there. Divorce. I sipped my tea too quickly, burning my tongue, and she noticed. She didn't laugh, just studied me with that steady look of hers. You remind me of someone, she said finally. Not him. Someone before. When I was younger. I didn't ask who. I didn't need to. The way her eyes softened told me enough. That night I lay awake replaying her words. You're just a boy. It echoed differently now. Not dismissal, more like warning. The age gap stretched out between us like an invisible table either of us could move. And yet, the next evening, when I found her struggling with a stuck window in the stairwell, I helped without hesitation. My hand brushed hers on the frame. She didn't pull back immediately. It was nothing. A fleeting touch. Anyone watching would have missed it. But walking back upstairs, my hand still tingled, and I caught myself imagining things I shouldn't. Her sitting closer, her voice dropping softer, her laugh meant only for me. I told myself to stop. She wasn't mine to imagine. Still, I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. It became a pattern, small excuses to see each other. She'd leave her door cracked when she heard me in the hallway. I'd linger by the mailbox even when I had no letters. Nothing said outright, but the air between us felt charged, waiting. One evening, I brought over a spare slice of cake from my sister's visit. She accepted it with a faint laugh. Careful. I could get used to this. We sat on her couch, plates balanced on our laps. She told me about the class she once taught before quitting, English Lit, high schoolers. They don't listen, but they remember more than you think. Like what? I asked. She tilted her head, thinking. The quiet things. The way you show up every day. The moments you think no one notices. Her words landed heavier than she meant. I wondered if she knew how often I thought the same about her. I was about to say something too honest, when a knock rattled her door. She froze, plate half raised. It was a neighbor, older woman, nosy, asking if she'd seen a missing package. The conversation was short, ordinary. But when the door finally closed again, the spell was broken. She set her plate down, smoothing the fabric of her skirt like she needed to erase what almost happened. You should probably. She started, then let the words die. I nodded, though I didn't want to. The next few days, I tried to keep distance. Did laundry at different hours. Walked with headphones in. But the absence pressed louder than the presence ever had. When we finally crossed paths again, in the stairwell, her carrying groceries, I offered to help. She resisted at first, then gave in with a small sigh. Inside, I set the bags on her counter. We stood there, closer than usual, the kitchen light sharp above us. She touched my arm lightly. A thank you? Nothing more. But she didn't pull away. Neither did I. The silence thickened. Her eyes flicked to my mouth, then back. I leaned, just slightly, not enough to be sure. She caught it, I know she did. Her breath hitched. But then she stepped back, hands tightening around the grocery bag handles. We should unpack these. I nodded again, but the space between us felt different now. Not untouched. Not the same. We didn't kiss. We didn't confess. But the almost of it stayed like a shadow, following me back to my apartment, sitting heavy in the dark. It happened on a Sunday afternoon. The building's water had been shut off for repairs, so most of the tenants left for the day. She didn't. Neither did I. We ended up outside, sitting on the low brick wall near the entrance. She had a thermos of coffee, and without asking, she poured me some into the lid. The air was cool, leaves dragging across the sidewalk in slow spirals. For a while neither of us spoke. Just the scrape of cars passing, a dog barking somewhere. Then she said, "You should be out with people your age." I laughed softly. "What makes you think I'm not?" Her eyes slid toward me. "Because when you're here, you're all here. People your age don't usually sit still like that." Something in her voice was sharper than before. Not unkind, but edged. "You don't want me around," I said, She didn't answer right away. Just tightened her grip on the thermos. Then, I didn't say that. The silence stretched. Long enough for the truth to press against it. I finally said, when you texted me that night, I thought about it for hours. Why me? Out of everyone. Why asked me in? Her mouth twitched, like she wanted to smile but couldn't. Because you looked like you needed someone to notice. That line cut deeper than I expected. Because it was true. I set the empty cup down beside me, rubbed my palms together, stalling. And you? What do you need? Her laugh was quiet, almost bitter. That's the problem. I don't know anymore. I turned toward her then, really turned, and she didn't move away. Our knees almost brushed. Her eyes didn't look steady, they darted, uncertain, like she was fighting herself. Sometimes, she said, voice low, I catch myself waiting for your door to open. Like a teenager. And then I hate myself for it. The words hit harder than if she'd touched me. She leaned back, looked up at the sky, as if saying it aloud had taken too much out of her. I wanted to tell her I thought about her too. That I lingered in the hallway just to hear the faint sound of her kettle boiling. That I wasn't scared of what she was scared of. But I didn't. Instead, I reached for the thermos she was still holding, my hand brushing hers as I took it. Neither of us pulled away. Her fingers tightened, just slightly, around the metal before she let go. The air felt different then. Charged. Like one more step would tip us into something we couldn't take back. She looked at me, steady, searching, and whispered, "What are we doing?" And I didn't have an answer. After that afternoon on the brick wall, something shifted. I expected more, another late message, another excuse to share coffee. Instead, there was nothing. Her door stayed shut. The hallway felt colder. At first, I told myself she was busy. Work, errands, life. But then days stretched, and I realized it wasn't an accident. She was pulling away. I caught her once in the stairwell. She had sunglasses on though it wasn't sunny, grocery bags cutting into her hands. She gave me a quick smile, too quick, and said, "Sorry, late for something." Then she disappeared before I could answer. The distance gnawed at me. I found myself listening for her footsteps, the faint thud of her kettle on the counter, but it was silence instead. One night, scrolling aimlessly, I saw her name pop up in a tagged photo, someone's birthday dinner. She sat at the edge of the table, shoulders angled away from the group, smiling politely. Beside her was a teenage girl, same eyes, same half-smile. Her daughter. I'd never known. She never mentioned it. The photo hit me harder than it should have. Not because of jealousy, exactly, but because it explained the hesitation in her eyes. The unspoken weight behind every pause. She wasn't just careful, she was protecting more than herself. After that, I couldn't knock on her door. Couldn't ask her why she hadn't told me. Instead, I drafted a message on my phone. I don't care about the age. I just care about you. But I didn't send it. My thumb hovered over send until the screen went dark. The next week, I tried waiting in the laundromat, hoping she'd show. She didn't. The dryer buzzed, clothes warm against my arms, but the seat across from me stayed empty. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. I left my clothes unfolded in the basket and walked upstairs. For the first time, I passed her door without stopping. No knock. No pause. Just silence. Inside my apartment, I sat on the edge of my bed, the unsent message still glowing on my phone. I didn't delete it. But I didn't send it either. It was raining the night it broke. Not heavy, just the kind that blurred windows and made everything smell like wet pavement. I came up the stairs with my hood dripping, basket of groceries in one hand, when her door opened. She froze mid-step, umbrella in hand. For a second, we just stared. Then she said, "You've been quiet." I gave a small laugh. "So have you?" The words weren't sharp, but they landed anyway. She sighed, set the umbrella against the wall, and gestured toward her apartment. "You want to come in?" Her kitchen was warm, kettle already on. She poured tea into mismatched mugs, sliding one across the counter to me. We stood facing each other, steam rising between us. Finally, she said, "I thought it was easier." Pulling back. I nodded. "Easier for who?" Her eyes flicked up, sharp for a second, then softened. "For both of us. You don't know what you're walking into. I have a daughter. A past. A life." I set my mug down, too hard, tea sloshing over the rim. "I don't care about any of that. I trailed off, pressing my palms to the counter. "I don't want this to be nothing." The silence after that felt endless. Her hand trembled slightly as she wrapped it tighter around her cup. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Not of you. Of me. What it would mean if I let this happen." That was the closest she'd ever come to saying it. My chest ached not from rejection, but from how much weight she carried in every word. I stepped closer, slow enough she could stop me. She didn't. Her eyes searched mine, as if waiting for me to break first. When I didn't, she exhaled, a sound almost like surrender. "Maybe," she whispered, "you deserve someone who isn't already halfway broken." I shook my head. "Maybe I don't want perfect. Maybe I just want this." Her laugh was soft, shaky, like it slipped out without permission. And then she reached across the counter, fingers brushing mine. Not a dramatic grab, not a desperate kiss. Just the simple, human weight of touch. Her thumb lingered on the back of my hand. "Okay," she said. Barely audible. But enough. And for the first time, the silence between us felt like an answer. Time didn't rush after that night. It slowed, stretched, found its own rhythm. We didn't fall into some sudden new life. There were still mornings when I left for work before the sun, passing her door in silence. Still evenings when she curled up alone with her books. But the distance between us wasn't sharp anymore. It was soft. Crossable. I started bringing her black coffee when I went down for mine. She teased me about how bitter it was, then drank it anyway. Sometimes she brewed tea for me in return, the mugs mismatched, steam curling like a signal only we understood. Once, on a quiet Sunday, we sat again on the brick wall outside, the same place where she'd once told me I should be with people my age. This time she leaned against my shoulder, thermos warm in her hand. Neither of us said anything about it. We didn't need to. Her daughter came by more often in those months. At first, I stayed invisible, slipping out before the knock on the door. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, introductions happened. Awkward hellos. Shared meals. I was the neighbor. Nothing more. And yet I caught her watching us, my neighbor, the woman who was no longer just that, like she was surprised we fit into her life at all. At 8:47 one morning, I found myself waiting at her door with 2 cups of coffee. She opened it before I could knock, hair unbrushed, eyes tired. She laughed when she saw me. "You're early." I shrugged. "Or you're late." She rolled her eyes but took the cup anyway. That became our thing, time bending to meet us somewhere in between. Months passed like that. Quietly. No declarations, no dramatic scenes. Just small habits stitching themselves into something steady. And still, there were nights when doubt crept in, when I thought about the words she once whispered, "You're just a boy." But then she'd reach across the table, brush my hand with hers, and the thought would unravel. Not gone, but lighter. Looking back, I can't point to a single moment when it shifted from fragile to certain. Maybe it was the time she texted me to pick up bread because she was tired. Maybe it was when I left my laundry in her dryer, and she folded it neatly without a word. Maybe it was just the accumulation of small things, the way real lives take shape. Now, when I sit across from her with tea cooling between us, I think less about what we almost lost and more about what stayed. And I realize, the story didn't end the night she said, "You're just a boy." It started there. It still hasn't stopped. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?